Welcome back to the Explainer. Okay, let's just dive right into this. Today, we are looking at a wild, fascinating collision playing out across the globe. We're essentially witnessing this massive clash between cascading real-world physical disruptions. Think everything from geopolitical conflicts to extreme weather, and the technology industry's deliberate, multi-billion-dollar push for ultimate digital control. Here's a quick roadmap of where we're headed today. We'll start with global choke points and crises, move into Hawaii's weather emergency, check out the market and economic ripples, and finish up with the fight for tech control.
All right, Section 1, Global Choke Points and Crises.
Now, what's really interesting here is just how rapidly this timeline has escalated. Literally a week ago, we saw the first attack on an Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, or ADNOC, vessel. Fast forward to Friday, and the UAE is reporting a third attack. And the result of all that? By Friday, we hit absolute zero. Not a single oil tanker was tracked moving through the Strait of Hormuz. One of the world's most critical energy pathways has effectively been frozen. The geopolitical deadlock we're looking at is just stark. Iran is flat out stating that the Strait of Hormuz will remain closed until Washington acknowledges Tehran's control and accepts its conditions. But at the exact same time, the U.S. is holding firm. They're planning to intensify economic pressure while keeping their naval blockade going indefinitely. It's a total, unyielding standstill at a major global choke point. And, that standoff translates directly into this number right here, $4.08. That is the current average price for a gallon of regular gas in the U.S. That's a massive 29% jump from just a year ago. In response to this, President Trump has actually asked Americans to accept these higher prices, neutrally framing it as a necessary, patriotic sacrifice in this ongoing conflict with Iran. But the friction isn't just economic, right? It's deeply environmental. We are currently tracking 2 expanding oil spills in the Gulf. To put that into perspective, the spill near Oman alone covers an estimated 2,000 square kilometers. Meanwhile, another spill is actively washing onto the beaches of Kesh Island. And compounding this whole tragedy is the fact that salvage and cleanup operations are severely constrained. Military conflict and delayed permits are literally preventing environmental teams from getting in there and doing their jobs. Which brings us to a really critical question. How are extreme physical environments compounding these geopolitical stressors? Because while human-made maritime chaos is unfolding in the Middle East, we are simultaneously watching completely uncontrollable natural chaos erupt on the other side of the world.
Let's look at Section 2, Hawaii's weather emergency.
25. Just let that sink in for a second. That is the staggering potential inches of rainfall that isolated portions of the Big Island could receive. A number like that instantly communicates the absolute severity of Tropical Storm Lala and the overwhelming volume of water threatening the island chain right now. When you get that sheer volume of water, hazards compound so rapidly. Hawaii is under a state of emergency, and they are facing life-threatening flash floods, massive landslides across steep terrain, and really dangerous storm surges. You got high winds threatening electricity and communications, which creates this deeply hazardous situation where medical services could easily become isolated. Residents and emergency agencies are scrambling right now to secure medication, drinking water, and backup power before things get worse, all while the tourism industry and local supply chains take a massive hit. And this brilliantly illustrates the bizarre, almost unbelievable extremes of our physical environment right now. On one side, Hawaii is battling acute, life-threatening floods from Tropical Storm Lala, but on the exact same day, the southern plains of the U.S. are just baking under entrenched, dangerous heat. We're talking heat so persistent that even the nights are too warm to allow for proper physical recovery. It's literally a tale of 2 extremes. You desperately need a boat in one state and cranked-up AC in another. So, with supply lines jammed up by conflict and whole regions getting battered by extreme weather, we have to ask, how are these physical disruptions rippling through the global economy? Let's trace this chaos from the physical world straight into the financial fallout.
Moving into Section 3, Market and Economic Ripples.
It's probably no surprise, but global oil benchmarks just wrapped up a very strong week, entirely driven by those tanker attacks and supply fears. Brent crude finished Friday up around 6%, and West Texas Intermediate jumped about 5.4%. What you really need to take away from this is that prices are climbing fast. Right now, the only things keeping them from absolutely exploding are high American oil inventories and some slightly weaker demand forecasts. But beyond just energy, the broader economic ripples are super fascinating. We're seeing mild inflation, which ironically is actually reducing fears of a Federal Reserve rate hike in September. But if you look at global equities, Europe just ended a 4-week winning streak, mostly because higher oil prices are really spooking investors. Meanwhile, as all this geopolitical uncertainty swirls around, defensive assets are having a moment. Gold is retaining a substantial monthly gain just based on those geopolitical fears alone. And that brings us to our final pivot. With physical, supply chains, and environments under such intense stress, how are tech giants seeking control? Because in a world full of geopolitical and environmental chaos, the tech sector is making a very deliberate, aggressive push to build structured, completely independent systems. Let's dive into Section 4, the fight for tech control. So the crucial point here is just how aggressively these corporations are deploying massive amounts of capital to gain ultimate authority over their domains. You have Apple developing internal AI models. You have DeepSeek rolling out distinct pricing tiers. Goldman Sachs is literally discussing a $500 billion infrastructure financing arrangement for NVIDIA data centers. And Pony AI and Uber, they're planning to drop 2,000 robotaxis across Europe. They are all actively seeking total, top-down authority over algorithms, infrastructure, and even physical transit. If we zoom in on DeepSeek's strategy for a second, it is clear that Chinese developers are moving way beyond just low-cost competition. By offering the economical V4 Flash, right alongside the highly capable V4 Pro, which, by the way, costs up to 14 times as much, they are handing customers highly precise control over their computing expenses versus capability. It's a brilliant tiering system for a market that is absolutely obsessed with controlling costs. Let's see how this builds with Apple's strategy. Apple is training internally developed AI models specifically to cut their dependence on outside providers. By keeping all that processing local on the device itself, they don't just gain control over performance, they vastly improve device-level privacy. Why? Because they aren't relying on massive, potentially vulnerable cloud networks anymore. They're pulling up the drawbridge. But, okay, let's ground this tech optimism for a minute. There is a deep irony here. As the tech industry tries to build these pristine, tightly controlled digital empires, they are still fundamentally tethered to a very messy physical world. Even digital systems face absolute chaos. I mean, a hacking group just claimed mass data theft from major organizations like Shell, Philips, and GE. And the internal tech community is feeling this anxiety too. You have over 1,100 tech employees calling for international coordination on advanced AI risks, while OpenAI is actively having to assess whether their upcoming models possess critical offensive cybersecurity capabilities. The digital world clearly has its own storms to weather. Which brings us to the end of today's explainer, and I want to leave you with this profound, lingering thought drawn straight from the heart of the tech industry's weekend debates. Can companies truly gain greater control over their models without simultaneously increasing cost, complexity, and systemic dependence? It's a massive puzzle. Thank you so much for exploring this with us, and we'll see you next time as we continue to break down the systems shaping our world.